Turkey's coming out of the freezers. It looks like it's that time of the year. Well, welcome everybody. I'll call to order the Nashville MTA Board Meeting. And first on the agenda is the roll call. Walter Searcy. Jessica Dalpin.
Present.
Gail Carr-Williams, present. Janet Miller.
Present.
And I know Mary Griffin was not able to be with us today. Next on our agenda is the approval of the October 28th, 2021 MTA Board minutes. I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any discussion? If there is no discussion, I will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. We have approval of the October 28th minutes. And next on the agenda is public comments. First, I have Mr. Bull, John Bull. Mr. Bull, you know the 3-minute rule.
I'll try to hold to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'd try. I live in Northern Antioch. 370 is the address. A frequent rider. Really picked up my riding. Yesterday I rode the bus 6 times, counting transfer, which is pre-COVID numbers. I noticed there's significant increased ridership on 55 and 52. We're talking barely enough hand straps, especially early in the morning. I think that's significant. One thing that I'm really impressed with is the transportation plan that Wego is offering for the cold weather response. It's very innovative, very detailed. Y'all have done some really good work on that. I note that the provisions for transporting dogs to the cold weather shelter, including kennels at the site. As someone who does animal rescue, I'm very impressed. Thank you all. Lastly, the bipartisan infrastructure bill with some myriad of federal funding opportunities, and you combine that with Bobby Jones, who you can hear over the internet, or the intercom rather. All this makes for a pretty happy Thanksgiving. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Next for public comments, I have Darius Knight. Good afternoon, Mr. Knight.
Good afternoon, everyone. My public comments today are concerning some of our buses, newer and older. I just got here on bus 717. The bus has an exhaust smell through the entire bus. Not understanding why the bus wasn't pulled or why the bus operator did not alert maintenance of that issue. But somebody who has asthma or any type of issues breathing, that's going to pose a threat to them. So I have sent an email and also put in public comments to Wego.com for them to look into that situation. I'm going to request that at least before the day is up, that somebody in maintenance pulls that bus before there ends up being a whole nother situation. There are also screws at the back seat that can jag a customer's clothes or actually harm them. I've been seeing with the 700 series buses, which are buses that we, MTA at the time, got in 2011. A lot of them need a lot of TLC, just like the NABI buses. And I just want to kind of reference last month's board meeting. Of course, the board did the right thing by deferring the New Flyer contract, but I just want to kind of make sure that the board understands that Wego will need buses to replace those. So I've asked staff, like since that meeting, to kind of just look at Gillig buying 40-foot buses, even though that's not ideal because you need 60, but you need something in place to replace those NABI buses because they are not going to last, and staff has been having the hardest time keeping them in service for the last 3 years. So also the other issue I want to bring, which is my last comment, is concerning Wego Central. I've had to get all over staff about the safety of Central needing more supervision because there is a supervisor who works her tailbone off, walking from the top to the bottom. And I mean, she's one person. She can't do it all. So I'm just going to ask that staff really work its hardest to make sure that safety is taken very seriously at Central, because if you don't, you're going to continue to have accidents. You had one in October where a bus operator crashed into the actual shelters in front of the center. So, I mean, if you're not going to take that seriously, please let us all know so that we can get the council to make sure that we are moving in the right direction in terms of better transit for Nashville, in terms of better bus. So I'm going to ask you all as an executive board to please look into these matters at Central and make sure that not only the old buses are being worked and cleaned properly, but the new buses are having issues as well in terms of people wondering who's cleaning the buses, including your own bus operators. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight and Mr. Bull, thank you both for being here and happy Thanksgiving to you. That concludes the names that I have for public comments. Are there any others present that wish to make a public comment? Are there any others present that would like to make a public comment? Hearing none, I will close the public comments portion of our agenda at this time. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, Mr. Searcy, I'm going to turn this over to you and your Operations and Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairperson, Madam Chair. I won't go through the litany of things you could be. Yes. I'm going to ask our Chief Financial Officer to stand and introduce to us the auditor. And she is going to bring us the audit report.
Thank you, sir. You do have in front of you the actual audit and then the required communications. And Erica, if you'll come, this is Erica Sager. She's a principal at Crossland and has been on this job for quite a while and is here to make the presentation for the audit.
Thank you very much for that introduction. As Ed said, my name is Erica Sager. I did serve as the first principal on the audit for fiscal year 2021. You should have two booklets in front of you. The first one with the picture on it is the one that we're going to go over first. Those are the required communications. Professional standards require that we make certain communications with those charged with governance, and those are included in this book for your reference. On page 1 is a letter from our firm to you. Thanking you, one, for the opportunity to be your independent auditor and external business advisors. A direct line of communication between our firm and this committee is a very essential part of the audit process. And finally, we want to take this opportunity to thank Ed and his team for all the work that they did in preparation for the audit. They were prepared for us and ready for us when the audit began, so thank you for all your help. On page 2, the report on the results, we did complete the audit for June 30, 2021, and did issue an unmodified or clean opinion, which is the best opinion you can receive. MTA is a component unit of the Metropolitan government of Nashville and Davidson County, and the state of Tennessee does have oversight of our audit process. So we did have a contract to audit with the state, and we have uploaded the final report to the CAR system, as well as completed the data collection form and submitted that to the clearinghouse as well. Our responsibilities under generally accepted auditing standards are to plan and perform our audit to obtain reasonable rather than absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement and that they are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Also, in accordance with the uniform guidance, we did examine on a test basis evidence about MTA's compliance with the OMB compliance supplement. That is because MTA did expend more than $750,000 in federal awards. At the top of page 3, significant accounting policies of MTA are included in the note A to the financial statements. We did review those and determined that they are reasonable and comprehensive in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Management's judgments and accounting estimates have been included here for you, some of the most significant ones. We did look at these and reviewed the assumptions and estimates and determined that they are reasonable in relation to the financials taken as a whole. At the top of page 4, we noted no alternative accounting treatments. Audit adjustments. During the course of the audit, we did propose 3 adjusting entries. And in addition to that, there were 2 client requested entries during the audit process. And those were just given to us subsequent to the receipt of the trial balance. So we looked at those in conjunction with our substantive testing. We did include those in Appendix C for your reference. And there was one unrecorded entry, which is also included in Appendix D. Representations required from management. We do require that management make certain representations to us during the audit. They have signed that representation letter, and we have included that as Appendix A. Other written material communications, we did issue a management letter for fiscal year 21, and that's included in Appendix B. We'll go over those in just a moment. At the top of page 5, we had no disagreements with management. Consultations with other independent accountants. In some cases, management might seek to talk to another accounting firm or other auditors about a specific matter. And professional standards require that if that happens, the consulting firm talks to us to make sure they have all the relevant facts. And to our knowledge, there were no such consultations with other accountants. Other than signing the engagement letter for fiscal year 21, there were no other issues discussed prior to our retention. We had no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. There were no fraudulent or illegal acts noted during the audit process, nor were any identified to us by management or the board. Information and documents containing audited financial statements. MTA's financial statements are included in the Metro CAFR. And other than that, we're not aware of any other documents that will include MTA's financial statements. At the top of page 6, we've included the areas of audit emphasis for fiscal year 21. We just included that for informational purposes. We do confirm that we are independent with respect to MTA. And on pages 6 through 8, we have included recent accounting pronouncements. As you know, the GASB continues to issue statements like crazy. So as these become effective, we will meet with management about their implementation. And going through these, the most significant one that will impact MTA is GASB number 87, and that's related to leases. MTA does have one significant lease, and that's the Metro ground lease for the Clarksville Highway property for the North Nashville Transit Center. And currently that's a 50-year lease. It has 2 10-year optional renewals. And when we implement GASB 87, right now it's recorded as an operating lease. But when you implement GASB 87, it will be now required to be on the face of the financials. So it'll be similar to a capital lease. And if it's reasonably certain that you're gonna exercise your option to renew the lease, you have to record the whole 70 years. So if that were implemented this year, you would see a $23.7 million asset on your statement of net position for a right to use asset, and then you would see an offsetting liability of $23.7 million. So it's a gross up of the statement of net position. So upon implementation of that, you have to show it retrospectively. So when we see the financials for next year, you'll see that for 22, but you'll also see a restatement for 21. That will be the same for all governmental entities effective for fiscal year 22. Pages 9 through 17. This is Appendix A. It is the representation letter from management. You can see on page 17, it was signed by management. It states that they answered all of our questions and gave us everything that we needed throughout the audit process. Beginning on page 18, Appendix B is the management letter for fiscal year 21. In planning and performing our audit, we did look at MTA's internal controls as a basis for determining our audit procedures, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of those controls. During our testing, we did note one matter that we wanted to bring to your attention. However, it is not a material weakness. It is not a significant deficiency. It's just an other comment for your consideration. And it's related to disbursements to sub-recipients. And a sub-recipient is a non-federal entity that receives a sub-award from a pass-through entity in order to carry out part of a federal program. MTA is the designated recipient of federal funding in this urbanized area, and then MTA passes those funds on to other nonprofits that help carry out that federal program. And during that testing, for our single audit testing, we noted that the timing for some federal drawdown grant funds for sub-recipients was made 6 days prior to the disbursement to the vendor, which exceeded MTA's typical 3-day turnaround. Also, once that was selected and we noticed that, we also noted that the check had to be voided and a replacement check had to be issued because the microcoding on the bottom of the check was not there. So the routing number and account number was missing, so they had to reissue. So this led to a 21-day turnaround between when the funds were drawn down and issued to the subrecipient. Again, this is not a finding for single audit purposes, it's just another matter. Included on page 19, we have our recommendation and also management's response. Our recommendation is that MTA management document their approval process for subrecipient grant expenditures and how it differs from their regular normal process for other grant expenditures. In addition, we recommend that MTA implement controls to ensure that timing of federal drawdowns are within a reasonable time frame window within making the disbursements to subrecipients. And finally, when there is a change to the accounting system or any related software, to ensure that all required information is printed on those check batches. And management's response in summary is that the alternative approval process will be documented and why it's different from our other normal approval process. They will do this to ensure that they stay within that normal 3-day rule, and that they will ensure that the microcoding at the bottom of the checks is there going forward. And it should be noted that this was one batch and one isolated instance. We did not note it on any other ones. Included on page 21, Appendix C, there were 3 audit adjustments. Number 1, 2, and 5 were audit adjustments, and then 3 and 4 were client requested entries. And then finally on page 22, Appendix D, these are our past adjustments. It was not material for us to make this entry, so we passed on it. However, we're required to communicate that to you in this communication booklet. Are there any questions about the required communications? Okay. All right, well, if you will switch to the other booklet, these are the financial statements. I will keep this very high level unless you have specific questions. Pages 3 through 5, again, are the independent auditor's report. It is an unmodified or clean opinion. Pages 16 through 18 are management's discussion and analysis of significant highlights from the year.
6 through 18 or 16 through 18?
6 through 18. Then on pages 19 and 20 are your statements of net position. Specific things I want to point out are the increase in property and equipment. There were purchases of approximately $23.9 million in fiscal year 21, and that was offset by the annual depreciation expense of $21.6 million. Deferred outflows of resources related to pensions and other post-employment benefits. These numbers are estimates and based on an actuarial valuation. We did look at those assumptions to make sure that they were reasonable. At the top of page 20, accounts payable and notes payable are down over the prior year, mainly due to timing for accounts payable and then payments on your notes payable during the year. Then for non-current liabilities and deferred inflows of resources, all the amounts related to pensions and post-employment benefits also come from the actuarial valuation, which we did look at. On page 21 are your statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Overall, total operating revenues decreased, which was mainly due to the 65 to 70% drop in levels of ridership over pre-pandemic levels. Operating expenses, you can see that those are up over the prior year, mainly due to the fact that although bus services were reduced schedules, MTA kept all their employees whole during this time. In addition, there were increases in health expenses and sick time related to COVID-related issues. Non-operating revenues are down significantly, mainly related to the Metro subsidy, but that's expected to be back to normal levels in fiscal year 22. Down at the bottom, capital contributions, you can see that that increased significantly over the prior year, and that was mainly due to the fact that more capital grants were able to be used in fiscal year 21 for replacement buses based on the fleet replacement schedule. Pages 22 and 23 are your statement of cash flows. Pages 24 through 28 are your summary of significant accounting policies. Again, there's no major changes from the prior year, and we did determine that they are reasonable and comprehensive. Then pages 29 through 60 are the notes to the financial statements. These are the details of some of the more significant line items in your financial statements. And it should be noted that 14 of those pages are related specifically to pension and OPEB. Other post-retirement benefits, I'm sorry. And then the remaining part of the report is required supplementary information. Again, this is more detail on your pension and OPEB liabilities, as well as your schedule of federal expenditures. And then pages 73 and 74 are our independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance and other matters. The results of our test disclosed no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required under government auditing standards. And then finally, on pages 75 and 76, this is our independent auditor's report on compliance for each major program. We did test the federal transit cluster as part of our single audit testing. And based on that testing, in our opinion, MTA complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to that have a direct and material effect on each of its major programs for fiscal year 21. There were no findings related to the single audit test work. And again, that single audit test work and data collection form has been submitted to the clearinghouse. Are there any questions on the financial statements?
Yeah, you said there was an examination of our actuarial position.
Yes, for pension and OPEB, an actuarial valuation is received, and we looked at those assumptions that the actuary used to determine those pension and OPEB benefit liabilities.
And they're in good order?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, team?
I would just say that this is not a simple audit. This is a complicated beast of an organization, and I just, hats off to Ed and the team for keeping us in a good place through the year, and thank you for your work.
Thank you so much, and I concur. They are very responsive during the audit and always prepared for when we arrive, so very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, we are at the point where there is a recommendation. You have seen it. I have seen it, and I am passing the recommendation affirmatively to the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Searcy. That is a recommendation from a committee, so not requiring a second. Is there any further discussion? There is no further discussion, then I will call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion, any abstentions? Looks like we have all ayes, and you have a good audit. Good job, Finance. Good job, Ed.
Thank you.
Ms. Sager, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next on the agenda, of course, is our monthly financial report.
I will be brief. On pages 10, 11, and 12, you have the financials through September. Again, there are no real anomalies. We are still seeing an increase in fare collections as we see ridership increase. And then one thing I will highlight that will be different when we go into October, on the contract revenue line item, you will start to see that rise, which is a good thing. We went back, RTA went back to pretty much full service on the MTA side of the Southeast Corridor services, and thus we will see those contract revenues going up. So you can be on the lookout for that for next month and throughout the rest of the year. As far as on the balance sheet on page 12, the agings are at the bottom, and again, for transparency's sake, RTA did owe MTA about $346,000 in receivables, and we owed them about $32,000 for ticket sales, fares collected, and things like that. So unless there are other questions, that would conclude the report for September.
Anyone? All right.
I don't have any, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. Let's look at now the annual risk assessment.
Yes, sir. Thank you. On pages 13, 14, and 15, we're taking a little bit different approach. As you know, we have been doing a risk assessment on mainly the financial side of things for the last 2 years. And I have received much feedback from the internal that they want to see the matrix again, and we will bring the matrix back. But I thought I would take the opportunity to not just go back over the same information. I have highlighted in bullet points that you see on pages 13 and 14, the areas that we've talked in much detail in the past, and gave you some updates as far as to what kind of mitigations we're doing for health insurance, for fare collection. Obviously, that's a big one because of the new fare collection system. And an interesting one is the parts inventory management with the supply chain issues that everybody's seeing. We've raised mins and maxes on our inventory for the critical parts in order to make sure we have those parts on hand to get the buses on the road, or keep them on the road rather.
Have you run into any problems with that yet?
There have been some. We are also seeing it on the bus delivery side, as you know. Actually, we have RTA has about 10 buses, over-the-road coaches that we will participate in because we do supply that service, and they'll replace 7 of our buses. And those were originally, Steve, probably supposed to be in about, or Andy?
Yeah, they were originally to arrive in October. They are on the line being manufactured and whatnot. It's looking like probably late January, early February is what it looks like now. We do have our auditor who goes in and kind of does their inspections and whatnot, kind of checking in and making sure that we're making the right progress.
It's crazy. Thank you.
So it is. So those are, you can read those, and if there's questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them. What I really wanted to focus on is we're expanding beyond just ed. We're looking for areas in the company that could impact our financial long-term stability, and we've highlighted 4 for discussion purposes. That we think are, and believe me, this is not an all-inclusive list. If the board has input or ideas of what they see as a possible risk, we would love to hear it in order to mitigate it, obviously. But the first one is nothing new to you. It's the manpower shortage that we've all seen. I'm not going to go read these, but I gave you a list of 10 items that are strategies that we have implemented, and we seem to be seeing some positive response in terms of more operator people applying for jobs and things like that. Retention is also a key point. Oh, and we are advertising that we're hiring. Yes, that's true. Steve was giving me a signal. I was going, wait, what?
Anybody within shouting distance?
Yes. Another key one is the strategic fuel sourcing. As you know, when there's hurricanes, when there's interruptions to the Colonial Pipeline, which actually goes underneath our property at Nestor, that's an interesting little trivia item. But if I could tap into it, I would love to. But one of the things that has been in all my years we've had issues with ice storms, whatever it might be, where fuel can't be delivered. And what we are planning on doing, we're in the process of developing an RFP to get a guaranteed supply contract. So with at least probably 2 vendors, reliable vendors that are out there and have a proven track record for being able to get that. We've, knock on wood, been fortunate to be able to find the supplies that we needed at the times that we needed them. But it's just a good business practice to go ahead and have that as a backup. So that's the way we're going to mitigate that. As far as COVID.
Can I ask you a question? How does
Yes,
that
ma'am.
work if there's no supply?
I
know this sounds
the
silly
vendors,
question,
well, there's several depots. I mean, we have the depot in Nashville, there's a depot in Louisville, there's a depot in Memphis, and they coordinate, and they have reserve tanks at those depots and things like that to have backup supply to fulfill contracts, because believe me, this is not unique.
Okay.
They do this with many, many people. So they're used to having additional supplies to be able to get those for the guaranteed supply contracts. They get highest priority for delivery. Good question, though.
You obviously pay a premium for that. So
Yes, you do.
It's not something that we want to.
Yes.
During those times, we all pay high premiums just to get gas, so but then when you drive to 20 gas stations, there is none. I just wanted to know how it was there, so that's
Yeah.
interesting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I don't know if I have to say anything about the one at the bottom of page 14, top of 15. COVID has obviously been an issue for everybody, and I'm not going to go into all the details. You've heard us describe those quite a bit as far as the 99s on the road for overcrowding, the buses. the driver barriers, just the different ways we are trying to mitigate. If you all have other ideas of how to help us mitigate that, we're open for any suggestions. And then the last one is a little bit different angle, and that is as far as grant funding. We have the Improve Act funding that we receive. That is actually it's discretionary funding, but it's on a competitive basis. We don't know that we would necessarily get it. If we don't, we need to have mitigation to figure out, are we delaying something on our capital plan? Are we moving numbers? Are we not numbers? Are we moving projects? Are we finding alternative sources? And probably at the last end of that paragraph, just for discussion purposes, we just know that it's going to be important, and Steve will probably rely on the board too, in terms of if that ever becomes an issue, that we just need to make sure we keep it in the forefront of TDOT's mind about how important our projects are and then how important that Improve Act money is. So that's just one example. Again, I said this is not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to open it for conversation and kind of give a more broad perspective on how we mitigate, what risks we do see and how we mitigate them. So I'd be glad to answer any questions, any other questions if the board has them.
If we had an uptick in confrontations with operators and passengers in this period, the so-called COVID period, and does that pose an additional problem for us?
I would say it would be a problem with attracting employees and retention, but that is certainly a concern. I know the barriers were for COVID, but Steve can answer more of this. But
Well, actually, I'd send it over to Andy,
Okay,
who's
to Andy.
frankly more in direct day-to-day.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think from a risk assessment standpoint, there has been, a lot of people are just tired with the mask mandates and just, it seems just tensions are a lot higher these days. However, we did install the driver barriers, and we do have our security personnel that do frequent different routes. We do, random touch points with our drivers and say, all right, what routes do we need to kind of put more visibility on? And we kind of keep it randomized because we can't be on every route every hour. So we do kind of have our security officers that do kind of check in and help alleviate some of those issues.
What has been, do we have a number of incident reports that?
I'm sure we have that. I don't have that here in front of me right now, but I can see if we can get that statistic.
Okay, great.
Good question.
A question, maybe it's a comment, maybe it's a question. It seems as we get into 2022, by the middle of the year, we're going to get to a point where it's the new normal, right? I mean, I think we all agree ridership isn't going to come back just state of Tennessee, leaving everybody at home. So it seems like as we get into 2022 and we assess that's the situation, that might be time for a conversation, right? About what do we need to adjust over the long haul, because parts of this are going to be here to stay. And as much as we all hate that, I just think that's the truth of it. So that was.
Yeah, I can actually touch on that, Janet. It's part of what we've already recognized. We sort of reordered the Better Bus strategies in that we've suspended a number of the routes. So when at the outset of the pandemic, Federal Transit Administrations significantly relaxed the normal regulations associated with service changes so we could respond on the fly. Mm-hmm. We reduced service levels both in recognition of reduced ridership, but also frankly to protect some of our more vulnerable employees who we were able to take off the road, keep on pay, as Ed and our auditors reported. Even though we cut service significantly, the expenses really didn't come down because we continue to pay folks. Frankly, what we found through the course of that, and as we've reported in the past, some of those temporary changes made a lot of sense, if not permanently, at least for the long term. The suspension of some of our commuter services, including Mary's former route, the 24 Bellevue Express, so we could redeploy those services in those key corridors where we saw a lot of our essential employees who continued to ride throughout the course of the pandemic, and address not only overcrowding, but to sustain and actually improve the quality of service. Mm-hmm. One of the most significant beneficiaries of that was the Dickerson Pike corridor, which had traditionally been an overcrowded line, and is now operating about every 12 minutes. So those are things we did initially in the pandemic. We then memorialized them by following through on the FTA procedure, doing our Title VI social equity analysis, doing our public hearing process. So those changes are, for all intents and purposes, permanent. Mm-hmm. until we choose to change them again. So essentially what we did was to reorder our better bus priorities, where we might have said, you know, we're running these express services, these commuter-oriented services. Gee, when we can afford to, we'd really like to beef up frequency on Dickerson Pike. We've essentially reordered that and said, we're cutting these services back, you know, suspending these routes indefinitely, and we're putting that service resource, you know, where it can be better utilized. And that'll continue to, you know, to be something that we evaluate as conditions change through the pandemic. Probably the most significant challenge, fortunately, it isn't this board's to worry about, is how we look at the Wego Star, the commute, because it is specifically a commuter train. And on the RTA side, because Regional Transportation Authority service is predominantly an office commuter, downtown office commuter oriented service, even though the MTA ridership is coming back to probably close to 67 or 70% of pre-pandemic levels. We're still seeing, even though we're seeing increases on the RTA side, we're still probably at about 25 or 30% of prior ridership. So that's going to be a real issue that, frankly, we continue to talk to the RTA board about.
Interesting, thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andy, I think you're up next
Yes, thank you.
regarding monthly operating statistics.
Yes, thank you, sir. All right, so if you open your pages to 16 through 20 is the operations dashboard for September. You'll notice that not only was Mr. Bowles speaking, but our ridership is on a slow upward trend, which we're all pretty happy about. However, we're kind of just figuring out where our crystal ball is going to lead us to. So there's not a lot of anomalies I want to talk about here. I provided a narrative that kind of illustrates that, but I will mention that a lot of our training efforts and recruiting efforts are pretty strong these days in preparing for our spring service changes. Right now, our goal is to be getting 20 to 25 new hires into our classes each month. And so I just want to say thank you to the recruiting and the marketing teams for those strong pushes. As Ed was indicating, that's one of our areas of concern as we kind of keep moving forward. So I will say that we'll have an update in an upcoming board meeting regarding workforce planning and as it looks and leads to our spring service changes. Also, we discussed in a previous meeting regarding a new concept for our dashboard. So staff has been reviewing this, and we're going to be coming back in a future month as well, just to kind of illustrate, you know, where we've come to and kind of put it in front of you guys and say, are we looking at the right things? Do we have the right goals lined up? And you know, any feedback that we can kind of discuss. So look forward to that. And then I'll also close with next month, we are going to see the early effects of what our service changes for October, because that's when we put in place our service changes. So we'll see some of the impacts that we made modifications to. So for example, our on-time performance and you know, our ridership, we made some adjustments to our routes, and so hopefully we can kind of start to see those changes. So if there aren't any questions, that'll conclude my report.
Queries? All right, thank you. Comrade Burke. To be replaced by none other than Comrade Freiberg.
Afternoon.
Thanks. All right, we're starting on page 21 in your packet. We've got the quarterly performance report. We're looking at the period of July through September. And similar to the last time that we did this report, many of these trends that we've seen previously are holding true, where we're seeing more rapid recovery on our most frequent transit routes. And we're also seeing more stable or increasing ridership where on our midday, evening, and weekend services relative to what we're seeing on our commuter-oriented services. I will say in a couple of areas, we're starting to see some of the more office worker type ridership coming back For example, on the Route 7 Hillsborough, you noticed a very large year-over-year increase in ridership there. A lot of more classes in person at Vanderbilt University and other universities, and additional staff coming back in person in that area of town, contributing to that. Also, the Route 6 Lebanon Pike, which has historically been more commuter-oriented services and runs parallel to the Wego Star alignment for part of the route, has seen increases. So early indications, we're starting to see some of that ridership return, but to Steve's point earlier, when we look at the regional services, we're still down more like 80% on those services as opposed to maybe 20, 30, 40% on the local bus services. I did want to highlight one interesting thing that's really kind of a fundamental change in our network, which is our highest ridership route, which has historically been the Route 56 Gallatin Pike. It's actually been replaced by the 55 Murfreesboro Pike, which has for a long time been the number 2. But that's actually taken over, and not just slightly, but by a significant margin. And we've been looking at what's happening there. We have school ridership has started to return somewhat for the STRIDE program with Metro Nashville Public Schools. It's around half of what it was pre-pandemic, but it's still a significant driver. And especially in that corridor, there's a few hundred students a day that are riding that route that we're not riding, or at least we're not riding with much frequency this time last year. We also, of course, have significant growth and development in the southeast area, Davidson County and Antioch, which is also the area where we selected for the Wego Link pilot first and last mile program. And so we continue to see that area as being one that'll have quite a bit of significant demand for transit in the future. And now we're operating every 10 minutes on weekdays on that particular corridor. Unfortunately, those high frequency and high ridership corridors are also those that are most likely to be affected by increases in congestion that are coming with people returning to work, because those routes generally run on major arteries that parallel major interstates. And you'll see that in the on-time performance statistics, especially for the 52 Nolensville and 55 Murfreesboro corridors, which run roughly on either side of the I-24 corridor, which is one of the most congested certainly the most congested in the city, maybe the most congested interstate corridor in the state, and is a challenging operating environment. Even though we're not running on the interstate itself, whenever there's an incident, you get overflow that can contribute to those disruptions.
So the enhancements on the Murfreesboro route have had what kind of impact?
The enhancements in terms of frequency or the signal priority?
Talking about signal priority and the other tech implements that we've placed out there.
So we're still looking at what kind of impacts the signal priority project has had. To be honest, the results have been somewhat ambiguous so far, because it's been difficult to compare with pre-COVID and COVID conditions what the effect has had. We're doing more on and off type comparisons of that system to get a better idea.
Yeah, one of the challenges, Walt, with that is our precondition. So our before condition was pre-pandemic, post was after, and it's hard to isolate because several things were going on at the same time. Even before signal priority took place, Metro had retimed signals, so we saw improved performance even before. The easy answer to your question is on-time performance, even with the decline Dan reported, is significantly better than it was prior to the system. We were in the mid to high 70s typically on that route. So the easy answer is it's way better. The more, frankly, complete answer is, and Dan, I think, hit the nail on the head, is still a little bit, up in the air over, okay, what impact was Metro retiming the signals? What impact was TSP? What impact was the fact we actually added service to the corridor and Katie's group retimed the routes to give them more running time. One of the things actually we're going to be digging in on as the Nashville Department of Transportation continues to grow and emerge, I'm going to toot someone's horn who will be very embarrassed if he happens to be watching Metro Cable TV. But they were able to grab a gentleman named Brad Freeze away from TDOT, and he will be the city's chief engineer. And Brad ran traffic control systems for the entire state. So he understands traffic management systems at a level that nobody else does, and we're working on engaging with him to kind of play with that system. And I'm not going to say it's a fact, but I think the presence of that, we worked very collaboratively with TDOT in that process and with Brad. I'm not going to steal any of the mayor or Faze or anyone's thunder, but I think being able to play with that system was probably a significant attraction for him to come on over to the Metro side.
Great. Okay.
All right, thanks. The only other thing I wanted to add was Andy mentioned this in his report, but as we look ahead, when we're looking at the next period will be for October through December. A lot of what we'll see, especially in terms of the productivity that we'll see system-wide and on certain routes, in terms of passengers carried per hour, we will see a decline in that initially because we're adding quite a bit of service with the October service changes, and especially with the addition of late night and evening service. You tend to see those types of services take a while for the ridership to respond to them being put into place, because you're really in some cases tapping into a new market where you have individuals for whom transit for that particular trip wasn't even an option in the past. But over time, we think in absolute terms ridership will continue to increase, and over time you'll see those productivity measures kind of normalize.
Well, and you're going to take a hit too with students, the seasonability of students not riding during the holidays.
It definitely is a seasonability to it. We try to generally look at so we'll do our year-over-year comparisons to the same time last year, so hopefully that'll even out a little bit. But you're right, that didn't have as much of an effect last year. That seasonality didn't, because they weren't riding in the first place. So it will be more of an effect this year.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we will hear from Rita regarding the legal services contract. We're firing them all, right?
I'm sorry?
We're getting rid of all the lawyers.
Absolutely not. Quite the opposite. I am here today actually asking for authority to increase the funding for our legal services contracts. Just by way of background for our new board member, back in 2018, we did go through a competitive bid process. Mr. Searcy was gracious enough to serve on that evaluation committee. And at that time, the board did approve legal services contracts for both Dodson Parker Bim as well as Bradley Arent. At that time, when we entered into the contract, we allocated $275,000 for Bim's firm and then $200,000 for Bradley. As you all know, following those contracts, two very unexpected things happened. Number one, obviously being the COVID-19 pandemic, which created just a host of issues that quite honestly look like they're going to carry over through 2022. The other has been more recent with the infrastructure funding bill being passed. When we brought Bradley Arent on board, we specifically were looking to them for their expertise in a lot of real estate and transactional work as we were sort of anticipating and thinking about transit centers. Bradley has been wonderful in working with Bim's firm and just, in advancing the North Nashville Transit Center. But those conversations about additional transit centers and the excitement, as our board chair knows, around them continues. So we anticipate even more movement as we also look to the better bus improvements and utilizing Bradley more with that. So understanding the landscape that we're about to enter into, we are asking to amend those contracts, specifically adding additional funding of $200,000 to the remaining 2 years of the contract for Dodson Parker Bim, and an additional $150,000 over the remaining next 2 years for the contract for Bradley Arent. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
I have no questions.
Well, that was easy enough.
I will say this though, that as board chair, I've had the great pleasure of working closely with Margaret Bim and a little bit with Bradley, and I think both firms have always held our best interest at heart and have worked diligently and very hard and very focused to make certain that we are always in the best legal place that we should be for everything that we work on. And Margaret, of course, has been sitting with us for years and has always looked after us with great care and with great legal expertise, and have always appreciated knowing that she's on the other end of the table to get us to the other side. So thank you, Margaret.
Absolutely. And I think this board would be just as proud as I am to work not only with Margaret Bim, but just her whole team. They pick up the phone instantly when I need something, but also to see the collaboration that her firm has had with Bradley. It has been just a pleasure working with both groups.
Great.
I just want to tell you what a pleasure it is to work with Rita. You know, you don't get to see as much of her as you do with me sitting here, but she coordinates a lot, and her legal knowledge is very much a part of why this is working. And so, Rita, thank you.
Well,
Let's keep her too, shall we?
I know, right?
Does everybody want a hug?
We won't get any of those lawyer jokes in here, will we?
Well, with that, again, we just do ask that the board would approve the recommendation.
well, you know, I hear all of this, yeah. But I agree. So I'll make the recommendation to the board that we allow the CEO to cut additional checks in the amount suggested.
There is a recommendation from the committee. Is there any further discussion? Any further comments? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There's no opposed and there's no one abstaining. So in that, the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Rita, while you're sitting there, why don't you take a moment to highlight the procurement opportunities for the coming month?
Sure. And this is pretty much the same list that the board saw last month. As you'll see here, we are moving forward with our bus wash, our escalator modernization, strategic fuel sourcing is very interesting based on Ed's report. Real estate services, again, that goes back to a lot of what we talked about with Better Bus and our transit centers. And again, the elevator and escalator preventive maintenance RFP. What I'd really like to say here again is just thank you when you all do look at this list and provide names to us. Mr. Searcy, I'll let you know there were some people you gave us for one of the things on our list previously, and our procurement staff did reach out to those individuals. And so even if an item that's particularly on this list, a company you give to us might not be able to bid for, they are helping us, your recommendations are helping us to form relationships. So again, just thank you all for paying close attention to these lists when we provide them.
Great. All right. With that, I pass my function back to the chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sergi. We kept you pretty busy this afternoon. Thank you. Awesome. Ms. Miller, your turn. You're up. Nice committee.
Okay, nice committee. Let's see, we have one informational non-action item today, and Felix is going to lead us through a discussion of the Inmotion status report. So hello, Felix. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here. I have a presentation, so it may require you to turn for the screens.
Let's see, which way am I going to go?
Sorry about that. So this is an annual item that we bring to you. It's just an overview of where we are with the implementation of the Inmotion recommendations. Just to give you an idea of how things are progressing to date with that. There you go. So just as a reminder, the plan outlines 7 key strategies on how to improve service over time. And as I go through my slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those and emphasize or highlight a few things that we're working on You're going to see also some milestones at the bottom of the slides. Because of space, some of those milestones have dropped over time. So just to let you know, we've done additional things besides that. But as I go through these, I would like for you to, think about the different things that we've been able to accomplish, especially with the limited resources in these first years of 5 years of the plan, and just consider that there's a lot of different things that have happened that we've taken advantages of, including challenges and opportunities, including the pandemic, and how we've been able to use that and shape and gear our recommendations toward meeting these strategies that we outlined on the plan. And also, as next year, we're going to start working on the update to the strategic plan. Believe it or not, it's been 5 years since we adopted Inmotion. So we're getting ready to do that. So there's a lot of things that are happening, and some of them came up in conversation here today, or where the trends are going with ridership. We're seeing how the city is growing, the changes in land use, the changing demographics, all these things that we need to be aware of and take into account as we develop the scope for the plan and how we want to set our system to be resilient to better respond to those things. I know this is hard to read, but I wanted to provide a slide showing that the timeline that we adopted with the plan looks like. And those first 5 years, things that we identified, like better bus service, extended service hours, better bus stops, new transit centers, simpler ways to pay the fare, expanded and improved access services, seamless connections, better pedestrian connections, regional service, and development of rapid transit services. And so as I go through these, you'll see how we've been able to make strides in those areas. Strategy number 1, it's about making it simple for our riders to use the service and make improvements that incentivize the use of the service rather than turn them away. There's a couple of things. We are working on the quick ticket to officially launch that, but we've been working on that already. So that's a very big project. So it's great to see that happening. The website is being redesigned. It's going to be available soon. But also a few months ago, you heard Justin come in here and talk about the redesigning of the bus stops. We have a couple of thousand stops throughout the system. So that's a very intensive project. So we're moving with that and incorporating the Wego brand and providing better information. When we left that meeting, we said we were going to go out and do some outreach. So as you can see in some of these pictures, we've been busy at work, gathering input from our riders at Central. We've also been doing research receiving feedback from our operators. And also the bus stop crew have been able to install a couple of these signs at selected locations for testing and get feedback from the riders as well. Strategy number 2, it's about start by, we heard loud and clear during Inmotion, before you try to build something big, start making better what we have, right? So that's what improving the existing service is all about. We've been doing that with the Better Bus. We had to break down that into fall and spring service changes because of some of the limitations that we have, but we've been working toward that. Fortunately, the city has been helpful with the budget that they've passed. So there's a couple of things happening in that regard, and this came up in the conversation earlier, but the Murfreesboro TSP project, the Transit Signal Priority, I wanted to highlight that. This project completed the testing earlier this year, and we're moving, as it was discussed earlier, we're moving into more of the evaluation and optimization phase for these. We're not working on this alone. This is a project with Ndot, especially with the traffic signal division, so it requires some of the help in that regard. But as we look into this and see how it's impacting the reliability of the service, the travel times and all that, it will give us some information about whether we're yielding the benefits to be able to expand these to other corridors in the city. Number 3, improving the access to transit. Facilitating that accessibility to transit services in conjunction with other modes, but mostly for our riders who are pedestrian at some point in their travel. We've been putting an emphasis on making those improvements to the infrastructure for bus stops and so on. But also we were able to launch the Wego Link, which is a first last mile zone. This is a pilot that we're running in Antioch right now currently, just a few weeks that we've been doing this. But this is a good opportunity, especially for areas that are lower density, where running a fixed route service may not be the most cost-effective or more the most efficient way to be able to access those areas and connecting people to our more rapid services. Number 4, making the service more comfortable and improving that experience for our riders. We've been working over the last few years on replacing the vehicle fleet, better buses, improving the state of good repair on that, but also improving the bus stops and shelters throughout the system has been a major focus. We know there's shelters that are past their useful life. We're replacing those. There's sites where we have smaller shelters for the amount of boardings that we have, so making those larger, and there's sites that need new shelters because we have people boarding there that require a shelter based on those numbers. I wanted to highlight the project that we have. This is the bus stop at Nolensville and Welshwood, there by the Nolensville Pike Walmart and Hardin. This is an example. This is one of our busiest stops in the system. So we expanded the stop here to be able to accommodate larger number of riders. And I think we've heard some good news about this project, which was part of the Nolensville Pike bus stop improvement project. Steve is going to give you some more information, so I don't want to steal your thunder on that, Steve. Strategy number 5. This is about enhancing the connections outside of downtown, and we're focusing on transit centers to be able to do that. This will allow for more trips, more trip options, and reducing the travel time for our riders. You've been hearing a lot about some of the main projects that we're working on in the last few months. That includes the North Nashville Transit Center as well as the Hillsborough Transit Center. We've been also having some conversations with developers at the Global Mall for a new transit center and some other more informal conversations as well. But I think one good thing we've been able to take out of this process is the exploring those partnerships with developers and how we can, maximize and improve the overall experience for our system, for our riders, but also as part of developments happening within the fabric of specific communities. Strategy number 6. Expanded the service to new areas, and this is more about filling in gaps, especially as the city grows in the region. There's going to be new needs that emerge. I think this takes a little bit more time, longer range at the regional level, but at the local level, I can point out to one of the improvements that we have identified for the spring service changes, which is a new route, the Skyline Connector between the Skyline area of Dickerson Pike to connecting to the Madison area. So this will allow for better crosstown services without having to go to downtown for many of those riders. And then number 7, again, like the number 6, this is kind of takes more time at the regional level as well, because it requires bigger projects and things that need to be constructed in the longer term. But as the region grows, we need to develop more and better and rapid services along the key corridors. I think one thing that I think is very important to mention here, the Murfreesboro Bus Rapid Transit project and the Clarksville Pike Rapid Bus projects were proposed for funding for planning in the fiscal year 22 capital spending plan proposed by the mayor's office for Metro. So that's going to be key to get the ball rolling. Those projects take time, and you need to start with a planning process to be able to get to where things need to be constructed. But also the Nashville Downtown Traffic Study is about to get to be kicked off. You approved the award of that contract last month. But that's going to be one important one that is going to be able to open up possibilities as we look at those rapid services where downtown should no longer be the choke point, but be able to provide those transit priorities that are going to be able to better connect services, not only for the bus, but thinking about the Wego Star and some our local services as well, utilizing those opportunities. And then, as we have some key priorities that we continue to focus on. Most of them I talked about and mentioned them. The Wego Star strategy study, I think, is going to be an important one. Steve talked about that before. But then looking at all these in the context of how we develop a scope to update the Inmotion plan and be able to capture all these strategies, the gains that we've made, and looking at what the current context is and how things may shape up. Of course, operational money is going to be important to be able to maintain a good balance in being able to move these projects forward in the future. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well done, Felix, thank you. I have two questions, and I'd love to get y'all's thoughts. My first question is about the new Federal Infrastructure Act. I mean, I know that's a big complicated thing, but are we tracking, what impact is that going to have? Is there any way to tell what impact it'll have on MTA? And are we keeping our eye on the ball to be sure that if we need to be, lobbying for a piece of the pie, that we are doing it? So.
Would you like me to take that, Felix?
You can start. I can jump in if I need to.
Yeah, and I had actually, Janet had comments that affected in the CEO's report. Obviously, it's a huge bill overall. And many of the very, very specific impacts are yet to be determined. Generally speaking, it looks like we will see about a 30% increase initially in our formula-driven programs, which is what our, kind of our routine, what we count on for a lot of the core state of good repair projects, our preventive maintenance, and our ADA lines. So that's a real positive. There have also been similar increase in terms of the larger funding pools, which are those formula programs. And then the two primary discretionary programs, or the competitive grant programs, that we would likely have an interest in. One is the bus and bus facilities program, which we've been very successful at in the past in getting competitive funds. That got a large bump of similar in that 30 to 40% range. And again, that's on a competitive basis. That will also have an increasing emphasis, probably no surprise to anybody who was following the debate over the bill, moving towards zero emissions fleets and looking at some of those alternate fuel strategies. So that's something that I know you know from prior reports. As we examine the future of the Nestor facility, that's one of the design considerations we have with respect to Nestor, as to what extent are we able to accommodate alternate fuels generally and zero emissions specifically. And then of interest, Felix alluded to, if the capital spending plan is approved by the council, that seed money to initiate planning, design, environmental review work on the Murfreesboro Pike bus rapid transit line, it would certainly be our intent to compete aggressively under the FTA Capital Improvement Grant Program for that. And that also saw similarly about depending on how you measure it, year over year, about a 30 to 40% increase as well. The caveat I'd put on that is there's also a lot of folks in line for those funds. So that's on what I'll call the more routine side. So the great news is, and Felix alluded to it, is should allow us to certainly advance the projects and services in the Inmotion plan and the Metro Nashville Transportation Plan. We have the opportunity to speed them up, speed up delivery of those over the next few years. Of course, the challenge is, the program structure remained pretty much the same. So the match ratios, we recall a lot of our pandemic relief money came 100% federal, a few strings attached. So for the most part, on our formula money, it's still an 80-20 federal local match. So good news, more federal money. I don't know if I'd call it bad news, but an issue we'll have to address with Metro is that means we'll need more local money to match. And on the competitive side, again, with so many folks in line, I would still expect that to be competitive in those programs, you're probably looking about a 50-50 split of federal and non-federal, because you'll have a lot of cities that have those dedicated local funding streams, the Denvers and the Salt Lake cities that can put 50% toward a very large project locally, without any real problem. So that's going to be something that we'll have to continue to. I'm looking at my friend at the end of the table.
Well, honestly, that was my second question, which is, what are we doing? Because there's all kinds of initiatives. Jessica, you're the expert on this. But in the community to push forward dedicated funding and all that kind of thing, are we staying plugged into those efforts? Because until we get that done, we're just incrementally improving. So.
Yeah, I would definitely invite Jessica to start that conversation.
Yeah, I'll say that Wego and Steve and anyone in his team who he's pointed me to for to be an expert in any program or event that I've hosted, Transit Alliance, Transit Now, or any organization, have been so responsive and wonderful to work with and so knowledgeable. Felix has come to things, and Trey has been, and Steve has been. So I'm working with Miriam right now. We're doing Transit Out Louds. I think just keeping it in front of people and continuing to communicate the urgent need for this type of dedicated funding source won't stop until we get it.
I think another opportunity we'll have, Janet, is as we start to advance the planning work, particularly in Murfreesboro Pike for that larger, that larger type of project. I mentioned I'll call it the overmatch, even though the capital investment grant program is legislated an 80%, 20% match. It's probably been at least 10 years since any project, got that kind of federal leverage. And part of those is they're very large projects, and they tend to be multi-year projects. So you might get a full funding grant agreement under one of those that says we'll fund it over 5 years. You have two choices. You either have that dedicated funding stream that says, okay, we have a reasonable expectation of getting it over 5 years, or basically you have to accumulate those local monies. So, okay, we'll gather up those local monies for 5 years, and then we'll go after. So I think there's going to be a real opportunity as we sort of, grow anticipation over the type of facility that we have the potential for Murfreesboro Pike to revisit or to reignite that conversation.
Thank you. Questions? Any other questions or comments?
I do have a question. And these longer term projects, like the up to 25 years, I was on a call yesterday morning with the GNRC Transportation Policy Board and getting these, these are the type of projects that would have to go into the regional transportation plan, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Right, so we would be having a conversation with Metro and TDOT and GNRC in order to get these projects in that big regional, transportation footprint plan, right? Are these projects currently in the RTP?
This project, yes, we have, what you see is we have kind of a bigger projects that are included in the regional plan. You may not be calling out specifically a Murfreesboro Pike project, but what happens is we have some that looking at regional corridors or rapid corridors, and then when they move into the transportation improvement program, which is more specific, that's when funding has been assigned for a specific project, and then we call them out from that more overarching project in the RTP into the TIP. But yeah, they are all included in that sense in the plan. And usually most of the transit projects are typically consistent with the plan, even if they're not spelled out specifically. There's an understanding that they tend to be consistent with the goals and everything else in the plan.
One of the things, it's a good question, and Felix's answer is good, but it also brings up one of the opportunities presented by the infrastructure bill. And I know Jessica knows this, but in that process in developing the regional long-range transportation plan and then the shorter-term transportation improvement programs, under federal law, they have to be fiscally constrained. So you can't just put out the kitchen sink of projects. You basically have to prioritize projects in a manner that pretty much match up with reasonably expected funding from all sources. So certainly when you put the impact of increased funding under the infrastructure bill, at least in the first 5 years of that program, and the additional state and local resources that have to go to leverage those funds, now the overall pot becomes bigger, the fiscal constraint becomes larger, and that not just Wego or transit projects, but overall regional projects. It's sort of a bigger opening, for more projects or more larger projects to be prioritized into both long and short-term plans.
Right, and that was my point. Like, are these prioritized by the region? And so I'm happy to hear you report that they're in there in a general manner for the long term. But that means they can be considered for the TIP.
Right,
yeah.
and you typically have to go through these processes for studying what those projects look like, what the local or preferred recommendation is going to be before you can even be more specific and go after federal funding for more the construction and development of those. So there is a requirement to go through that process anyway to be able to see what used to be called the alternative analysis process.
Appreciate that.
Other questions, comments? All right, it just feels like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we need to be pushed on it as hard as we can, right? So,
Absolutely.
The only other point I'd make on that, we also participate in several trade groups, really from prior to. So now that the bill has been signed, frankly, a lot of us will start working on the next bill 5 years out. But one that's been particularly effective is a group called the Bus Coalition. We participate with the American Public Transportation Association, which is the very broad and largest advocacy and trade association for transit. But it's also a mixed tent, rail, commuter rail, even intercity passenger rail. So frankly, a group of us kind of put our own little group together, subsets of APTA, on the Bus Coalition to focus on growing the bus program. And greatly successful over the last 3 or 4 years of increasing the shares of bus, both in the formula program and in the discretionary bus program. So even beyond, trying to compete for CIG money, capital investment grant money for a project like Murfreesboro, the super huge projects, that's where a lot of that discretionary bus capital that we might compete for on a fleet project or potentially on a Nestor upgrade project is going to be super important.
great, thank you. Okay, thank you, Felix, great report, and I will hand it back to you, Madam Chairperson.
Well, thank you, Ms. Miller. These titles got to keep up with, right? What a great report. And Felix, thank you. I mean, we've been working on this for quite a period of time, and to start seeing it come to where it needs to be and sort of see that we're able to use this to even take us to the next level is exciting. So thank you very much for a great report. So I think I have Rita, Ms. Turner back up again.
Yes, I think this is maybe the last action we're asking for from this board today. This is the 2022 meeting schedule that we're asking you all to approve with our normal fourth Thursday of the month dates, except for November and December. The only thing I would note is, although it says Wego Central, unless this board absolutely tells us you want to go back exclusively to Central in 2022, Monica House and I have talked, and she is making an effort to at least secure some alternative locations. Again, we don't know what 2022 will bring, but that is our plan at this point, to at least have some alternative locations for this board.
There's another note that you have on the proposed schedule.
I have another note.
Yes, that's the 1:30
Right.
committee meetings.
The 1:30 committee meeting.
It's the
I can jump in on this because
on the top. I'm sorry.
poor Mary, Walt and I talked about this today. Poor Mary, when she got this package, she called me in a panic. She said, "Oh my God, I've been on the board almost 2 years and I think I've missed every committee meeting." You'll recall our old format pre-pandemic was the committees would meet prior to the board meeting. And actually the way we set it up was the committees would meet at 1:30, and then we, through the course of sometimes having to wait extended periods, kind of went through rolling right into the board meeting. Pandemic hit, we were virtual for quite a while, and essentially, given our growing pains with WebEx, Rob, we really need to convince Metro IT that WebEx should be WEBX, because I think it needs to be a 4-letter word. That frankly, we just rolled the committees into the current format. And then we just kind of kept rolling with that. And I know, in the conversations that we've been having in terms of our board governance guidance in the future, we want to take a hard look at committees. So we're going to kind of publish the annual calendar like this, but per Rita's comment on being at Central or being at other locations for better social distancing. Right now, I think the short-term plan, until we decide differently, is just kind of keep this format, until we decide we want to change it.
Yeah, and I think we can just have that caveat with the motion that it is subject to change pursuant to space and pursuant to if through our board governance strategic planning, we change dates, because with us, what we do on the third or fourth Thursday of every month. Just saying, it's just been a while. What you say, Ed? You're shaking that head, right?
So we're going to keep combined board committee meetings like we've been doing until we decide otherwise.
Correct. And thank you for that, Mr. When you said 1:30, I had January 30th in my mind. I was like, what's happening in January?
So if I can have a motion, it would be great.
I move to accept.
There's a motion, there's a second. Is there any further discussion? If there is no further discussion, I will call for the vote. Everyone in favor, say aye.
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 There you go. The motion carries. So we do have our schedule that certainly is subject to amendment at a later date and time should it be necessary. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Bland, you are up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, members. A few things, some of my recurring items. Update with respect to our COVID status. Again, we kind of track with the community as a whole in terms of employees. So the community's seen a little bit of an uptick, not a major uptick lately, but a little bit of an uptick. And we've kind of tracked similarly. As of this morning, we had 3 employees off duty for positive on COVID and 1 off pending test results. Tragically, after kind of an extended illness, we have had an employee who passed away from COVID-related complications. So we're all kind of trying to deal with that. That was about a week ago that occurred. On a more positive note, I really want to extend, I don't think he's here today, but our senior safety manager, Nick Oldham, who has worked, I think the folks at Metro Health Department are sick of hearing from Nick, but it's been a great partnership. And through his leadership and their cooperation, we were able to bring an on-site vaccine booster program into Nestor a couple weeks ago. And we had, I think, Andy, you might remember, over 150, 200 employees able to get their booster shots through that process. So that was really valuable. I want to express gratitude for you all acting on Rita's recommendation to expand Margaret's contract. We're going to keep her busy. As you all probably know, we are certainly caught in the middle of pandemic politics. We continue to fall under the Transportation Security Administration's requirements mandating masking of customers and employees on our vehicles in our facilities. And unless you've been under a rock for the last few weeks, the state has passed legislation limiting the ability of public agencies to mandate masking. There is a provision in that law for local government entities that are at risk of losing federal funding to petition the Office of State Comptroller for an exception. We tried to make a run at it through our state association. Basically, they submitted kind of a blanket submission on behalf of all 25 of their member agencies. State Comptroller said, sorry, that ain't gonna work. So Margaret and Rita will be working diligently in the coming days to file our application for that exception. And if it's not granted, everything I told Janet about all the opportunities of the infrastructure bill just went out the window. So.
Masking still, despite the state mandate?
Absolutely. And right now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Margaret, it's actually still in court, or there's been legal challenges to it?
Well,
or-
it's been more to the school, but it is an ADA component, American Disability Act, American Disability Act component. But there's some really good law that this federal mandate preempts state law. And so, you know, it's as you probably know, the comptroller immediately granted exemptions to federal contractors who are universities who applied that day. So, you know, there's a question really whether you should get and you may even have to apply for an exemption, but you also want to be respectful of the process. So that, you know, just the back and forth that Steve's referring to that Rita and I will talk about what our next steps are. There is also an individual right of action, you know, for folks who believe you are violating the state mask non-mandate.
So all this is to say thank you again for expanding the cap on our legal contract. I think it will be. Do you want to revisit the number, Rita? My next item was to recap at least what I know so far about the federal infrastructure bill. The only thing I'd add to the comments I made in response to Janet's question earlier is, in addition to those major programs I talked about, which will be the overwhelming bulk of funding we would be seeking and receiving, there are a whole bunch of little niche programs, that we will look at opportunistically. And, some of the past experiences we've seen that would be a good analogy, or like the HOPE grant that we got for North Nashville Transit Center. And some of those other smaller, we're working with the city and Ndot on what's called an ATC MTD, a Congestion Management Technologies grant to implement some of the transit priority measures and headway management systems in the Charlotte corridor. So those will come up, but, where our formula programs and the CIG programs are in the billions and billions of dollars, these might be $25 million a year opportunities nationwide that, if you're really successful, you see $200,000 out of. But there are a slew of them. So Felix's group and Billy Higgins are going to be real busy over the next few years. With respect to North Nashville Center, it's been mentioned a couple times today. We do anticipate demolition to commence by the end of the month. You all and our North Nashville stakeholders will probably see a communication from our marketing group in the next couple of days. That will be a preview of a broader release so that folks know, when they start seeing, whatever the heck, I don't know. Do they still do wrecking balls, Trey, or is there something, or am I just showing my age? I wanted a wrecking ball. Could we get a wrecking ball? When you see that, you'll see that'll be progress on that project, so we're anxious for that. I want to thank Gail for her leadership on working with our community advisory group up there. We had some great participation in trying to identify some of maybe the cultural characteristics of the center's design. Gave our design team some very good input. And I expect right now our plan is hopefully to have a pretty significant item on the December agenda to give you an update and probably bring Smith G in and kind of show you where we are with that project. So, but it's moving along very well. I also want to thank John Bull. John always has a way in his public comments of previewing my report. So I want to acknowledge particularly the work of Miriam Leibowitz on our community relations staff. She really took lead for us in an interagency partnership on some of our homelessness issues and our homelessness partnership. As you know from past reporting that we've done with the Homeless Impact Division, we have several programs, but it is that time of year, as Gail said when she started the meeting, that our cold weather cards go into effect. So that's been a really neat partnership to try to keep people safe and able to get to shelter, when they really need to, when the weather gets cold. So that's been really positive. The Ed and Shelley have kicked off the budget process for the upcoming year. So I refer to it as, with all of our department heads, as the mad scramble for cash. The better prepared you are, the better off you'll be. At your December meeting, as has been kind of our custom, we'll do kind of our first budget workshop for next year. That will also include some conversation of next phase better bus enhancements. We anticipate when Metro comes out with the process for the upcoming year, we'll kind of repeat our past process of, here's our baseline request, and kind of repeating back what I think Ed had reported earlier. Our baseline request will encompass our normal budget plus full year funding of the better bus enhancements that were done in October and are scheduled to go into effect in April. And then we'll be covering with you in December some of our options for the next tier of better bus to go in as that kind of tier 2 request that we put in to that process. So December will be kind of jam-packed. Felix reported on the downtown neighborhood traffic project that we're partnering with the city, TDOT, and the Downtown Partnership on, and that will be kicking off with the consultant in the next week or two. Talked about the submission by the mayor to council of the capital spending plan. They deferred it. There have been a couple amendments proposed, and we expect the council to take it up in early December. But we do expect to fare pretty well. Certainly our matches, what's been proposed is our regular grant matches, significant amount of funding for bus replacements. As Felix alluded to, kicking off work on the Murfreesboro Pike and the Clarksville Pike, at least on planning and environmental work, and more bus and shelter upgrades, which are kind of humming along at this point. Last week, several of us were able to attend the annual conference and expo of the American Public Transportation Association, huge trade show for our industry. I particularly want to thank Ms. Dauphin for attending on behalf of the board. I think she got, yeah, I was telling Gail earlier today, we were on the phone, and like, when you take a board member to one of those events, you're like, okay, you can tag along with me or the whole, we can go to meals and I'll make sure I walk you around the floor. She lost me in the first 2 hours. I think she now knows more people at APTA than I do, and was able to do a lot of networking with other board members, which I think will serve the board well. So I really do appreciate you taking the time. Jessica and the shoe leather. You all probably have read Mayor Cooper has announced the hiring of the new Ndot Director for the city of Nashville. Ms. Diana Alarcon is coming to us from Tucson, Arizona, with over 30 years of experience. And I had the opportunity to meet her during their interview process, and very impressive woman, very well credentialed, very thoughtful. So I think she'll be a tremendous asset to Nashville, and we're looking forward to work. I'm looking forward to work. They don't know her yet, but I'm looking forward to working with her, and I'm sure the rest of our staff will as well. And I feel like set this up, so I get to, I was going to offer to let him do it, but on November 4th, the American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee awarded their grand award for engineering excellence to our Nolensville Stop Transit Project, improvement project in the small transportation projects category. So Trey and Lydia, our CDM Smith design team, our contractors, certainly in addition to our customers who really appreciate the upgrades, the engineers appreciate it as well. And this makes the second award for it, as Walk Bike Nashville had already awarded the project with one of their top awards. I will conclude with a couple of the RTA cases or RTA items, as is usually the case. So we're running the Titans Express, Wego Star Titans Express, and as is usually the case, ridership on the train rides with the fortunes of the team. Ridership is up. We're averaging over 600 rides per home game after 5 games. And the way things are going, I would expect that to do nothing but go up again. So anyone who is fearful that everybody's going to be afraid to ride transit, they're not going to want to jam together, I guess yet they haven't been to a Titans game. So we'll look forward to that continuing. Andy had reported on the supply chain issues, which are delaying some of our commuter coaches on the RTA side. They're also affecting the delivery of some access replacement vehicles. Frankly, that's also of concern. And then the last thing I'll report on, also an RTA issue, is we are advancing, we are advancing a park and ride project with the city of Murfreesboro adjacent to their emerging transit center in the Murfreesboro area. So unless there are any questions, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone have any questions for Steve? Steve, you always give such an incredible, comprehensive report, so thank you very much. So just a few things, right? So first of all, the audit, great job, Ed, and the highlights. And one thing I did write down that you said was that we kept our employees whole. And I think as we enter into this Thanksgiving season, that is something to be very grateful, and that we should have much gratitude for that we were able to do that. And I feel very proud as a board that we were able to support those efforts, that we kept our employees whole. And I did not know about one of our family members passing away, so our sincere condolences to their family and to you all as colleagues. That's always a hard thing, right? And so thinking about that person and their family, especially during this season. So Renuka, I don't know if she's still here. I just wanted to thank her for getting the voice of Bobby Jones. I mean, I have listened to Bobby Jones gospel since I was a kid, right? On Sunday mornings. And he has a voice of silk, and he also has a voice of warmth and comfort that just makes you feel like you're going to get through what you need to get through. So I'm just really proud of her for being able to go out and get his voice, and all of the city gets to hear him bring that sound to Wego. On nothing but good about that. So I really am feeling really good about that. Jessica, how about you going out to be a rock star at APTA, right? So congratulations, and Grateful that you were able to represent MTA. And Mary, I know she has been working with, I can't remember who she's working with, but really helping with the New Americas office and really working hard to help us recruit drivers. So really proud of her, and always watching Janet, you anchor us in such incredible ways as chairs of your areas. And I thank you all for that. Again, it's just an opportunity for our board to sort of support MTA Wego in meaningful ways, and proud to sort of sit here as your chair. And thinking about that, we have been really working on what it is that we want to look like as a board, and thinking about that in our planning, our strategic planning sessions. So Margaret's going to call each of you and just sort of get a quick idea from you to sort of think, what are your expectations to make certain as we plan this, that's in consideration. So look for her call and answer it, because after all, yeah, oh yeah, you were supposed to bring donuts today. Yeah, I was. Wait, what's up with that? But and speaking of Margaret, right? I excited that you continue on with us, and those words I said earlier are very true. But also, Janet shared with me about an amazing award you just received, an amazing national award. And I want to make certain that I get it just right. It's the, they say the Titan of the Nashville legal scene. You are a Titan, girlfriend. The Titans think they're the Titan, but you, I don't know. And you are an inspiration to all of us. You've been named the recipient of the Honorable Florence K. Murray Award. The national award is given annually to an individual who has influenced women to pursue legal careers, open doors for women attorneys, and advanced opportunities for women within the legal profession. Congratulations, Michael. And the only thing I will say is that you have opened doors beyond just the legal profession, but you open doors for women and all people all the time, and I'm grateful that you have done that for me as well. Even though I do follow myself in the legal profession, but yet and still, there's other ways that you open doors for people, and thank you. And thank you for being steadfast with us in the work that we do, and you and Rita are quite a team, and grateful for what both of you do for MTA Wego. Monica, keep finding us good places that give me the social distance, that give me that safe space that I need to sort of still be here, and I appreciate that very much. To all of you, y'all rock. Mr. Bull, thanks for coming and bringing us good stuff all the time and helping us think about being better. I appreciate that very much. It's meaningful. To the rest of you, that's all I have, but happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your families, enjoy yourselves, and stay safe, and happy fall, happy Thanksgiving. Anybody have anything else for the good of the order? If that's the case, then we are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.